I never thought breaking through the glass ceiling would be this hard, let alone shattering the bamboo ceiling. A term I didn't fully understand until I lived it. I had always been ambitious, driven by the stories my mother told me about how, in her day, Black women in the corporate world were barely visible. She didn't want that for me. She wanted me to reach the top of the corporate ladder, but as I would come to realize, my journey would be riddled with challenges that neither she nor I could have predicted. My story begins in a bright college lecture hall where, like so many other young women, I believed in the power of hard work and talent. I had excelled academically, top of my class, and I knew my worth. My professors had praised my intellect, and my friends constantly told me I was destined for greatness. With my shiny new business degree and the world seemingly at my feet, I landed my first corporate job at a prestigious firm. The future felt limitless. I remember thinking, this is it. This is where it all starts. But, as the weeks turned into months, and then into years, I started noticing subtle things. At first they were easy to brush off, the way my colleagues would talk over me in meetings, or how I was assigned tasks that seemed more administrative than strategic, while my peers were working on projects that were clearly preparing them for leadership roles. I thought if I worked harder, if I was the first in the office and the last to leave, things would change. I believed that surely someone would notice my efforts and recognize that I had potential far beyond the menial tasks I was being given. But as the months dragged on, the silence grew louder, and the promotions I saw others receiving eluded me. And then there were the microaggressions. I didn't have a word for them at the time, but I felt them keenly. It was the offhand comments about my hair, my clothing, my tone. Once, after I'd shared an idea in a meeting that I'd spent hours preparing for, my boss smiled and said, "You're so articulate," as though it was a surprise that a Black woman could express herself so clearly. It stung, but I pushed it down. I didn't want to be labeled as angry or difficult, the kinds of labels that could derail my career faster than anything. Despite these challenges, I kept pushing forward. I took on more responsibility than my role demanded, mentored younger colleagues, and volunteered for committees outside of work hours. But no matter how much I gave, I couldn't seem to crack the ceiling above me. At one point, I was passed over for a promotion I was more than qualified for, in favor of a colleague who had been with the company for half the time I had. He was a white man who, during meetings, often deferred to me for answers because he didn't fully understand the work we were doing. Yet, when it came time for advancement, it was he who was chosen. I remember sitting in the HR office after that decision, listening to the same canned explanations I had heard before. "It's not your time yet. You're doing great work, but we think you need more experience." Each sentence was like a dagger, not just because of the lost opportunity, but because I knew deep down that the reason wasn't about my experience. It was about who I was, or more precisely, who I wasn't. I wasn't white, I wasn't male, and I wasn't the ideal image of leadership that corporate America seemed to hold so tightly to. But the hardest part of my journey was the isolation. As one of the few Black women in my office, I often felt like I was fighting this battle alone. There were days when I'd come home and cry, not because I wasn't good enough, but because I was exhausted from constantly proving my worth. The emotional labor of navigating an environment that wasn't built for me was heavy, and I carried that weight with me everywhere I went. I wanted to talk to someone, to confide in my colleagues, but there was an unspoken rule that Black women in corporate spaces weren't supposed to show vulnerability. We were supposed to be strong, unshakable, and constantly on. I reached a breaking point one evening when I was invited to an off-site leadership meeting. A rare occurrence in itself. I was excited, thinking this could finally be my chance to be seen. But when I arrived, I realized that I was one of only 2 Black women in a room of 50. Throughout the meeting, I felt invisible. My ideas were glossed over, and when the meeting broke for lunch, I found myself sitting alone at a table, while my colleagues laughed and networked across the room. It was in that moment that the weight of the bamboo ceiling came crashing down on me. I realized that it wasn't just about my skills or my performance. It was about systemic barriers that were designed to keep me and women who looked like me out. Corporate America wasn't just about glass ceilings. There were bamboo walls, thick and strong, that kept Black women from advancing, no matter how hard we worked or how qualified we were. This journey is not easy. It's filled with moments of doubt, frustration, and heartbreak. But every time I think about giving up, I remember the young girl who walked into her first corporate job, believing that she could change the world. I owe it to her to keep fighting, not just for myself, but for every Black woman who has been told that she's not enough, that her voice doesn't matter, or that she's too much for corporate spaces. Because the truth is, we are enough. We've always been enough. The problem was never us. It was the system, and while breaking through the bamboo ceiling may seem impossible at times, it's a fight worth having. We belong at the top, and it's time the world sees that. So to every Black woman reading this, know that you're not alone. Our journeys may be different, but our struggles are shared. Together we can break through the barriers that have held us back for so long. And when we do, we won't just shatter the bamboo ceiling, we'll rebuild a new one that lifts us all. As I reflect on my journey, I realize that one of the most pivotal moments in my life came when I decided that I could no longer carry the weight of the world on my shoulders alone. I was trying to fix everything on my own, thinking that if I just worked harder, spoke up more, or found new strategies, I could break through the barriers in front of me. But what I failed to realize at the time was that I was not meant to fight this battle alone. It wasn't just about the external fight within corporate America. It was about finding a way to heal and strengthen myself from within. It started with therapy. I remember the day I made the call to a therapist who specialized in helping Black women navigate professional environments. At first, I wasn't sure what to expect. I had always prided myself on my strength, on being able to handle everything, and seeking therapy felt like admitting that I couldn't. In therapy, I unpacked years of microaggressions, internalized stress, and the emotional toll that navigating corporate spaces as a Black woman had taken on me. I learned how to name the feelings that I had previously ignored: frustration, fear, anger, and exhaustion. Through counseling, I was able to understand that the problem wasn't me. I had spent so many years believing that I had to fix myself to fit into corporate America's narrow mold. But therapy helped me see that the mold itself was flawed. One of the most valuable lessons I learned in therapy was the importance of setting boundaries. I had been operating under the belief that I needed to overextend myself constantly to prove my worth. But this wasn't sustainable. My therapist helped me understand that it was okay to say no, to step back when I needed to, and to take time to care for my mental and emotional well-being. For the first time, I began practicing self-care without guilt. I started meditating, journaling, and prioritizing activities that brought me joy outside of work. These small acts of self-compassion became crucial in my healing process. Around the same time, I began reaching out to other Black women in corporate spaces. I attended networking events, joined professional groups, and sought out mentors who could offer guidance and support. This community became my lifeline. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I heard stories from other women who had experienced the same struggles I had, and together, we began sharing strategies for coping, for advocating for ourselves, and for pushing through the barriers that had held us back. This network of Black women provided not only emotional support, but also practical advice. We began working together to identify opportunities for advancement, advocating for each other in spaces where our voices were often silenced. In these circles, I found allies who encouraged me to take risks, apply for leadership roles, and step into spaces where I had once felt excluded. With their help, I began to regain my confidence. Slowly but surely, I started to believe in myself again, not because someone had validated me, but because I had redefined what success looked like on my own terms. I also sought out executive coaching, which gave me the professional tools I needed to navigate the corporate landscape with more strategy and intention. My coach taught me how to negotiate for promotions, how to advocate for myself during performance reviews, and how to build a personal brand that showcased my strengths. These were skills I hadn't been taught before, but they made a world of difference. I no longer felt like I was waiting for someone else to notice my contributions. I began to take ownership of my career path, charting it with purpose. As I grew stronger internally, the external shifts began to follow. I found myself stepping into leadership roles, not because someone finally allowed me to, but because I demanded it. I became more vocal in meetings, confident in my ideas and my right to take up space. And slowly, the opportunities that had once seemed out of reach began to present themselves. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. But even with all of this progress, I knew there was still something missing. I had made great strides, but there was still a part of me that felt like I was fighting an uphill battle alone. That's when I came across a book that would completely change the trajectory of my career. Beyond the Bamboo Ceiling, Breaking Through Barriers for Black Women in Corporate America. I'll never forget the first time I opened its pages. It felt like the author was speaking directly to my soul. This book wasn't just filled with motivational platitudes or generic advice. It was a detailed roadmap specifically designed for Black women like me who were facing the unique challenges of navigating corporate spaces. The author broke down, step by step, how to overcome the systemic barriers that had been keeping me and so many others down for years. She didn't just talk about the problems, she offered actionable solutions. One of the most transformative sections of the book was about reclaiming your narrative in the corporate world. It taught me how to reframe the way I saw myself, not as someone who was constantly struggling to fit into a corporate mold, but as a leader who had unique skills and perspectives to offer. The book gave me tools for self-advocacy, strategies for building alliances, and advice on how to push through the barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. What truly made the difference, though, was the actionable steps in the book. I began practicing the negotiation tactics outlined in the chapters, followed the advice on how to network strategically, and embraced the mindset shifts that helped me see myself as someone who belonged in leadership. The results were almost immediate. Within months of implementing the techniques I learned from the book, I secured a promotion I had been passed over for before, and I finally felt like I had control over my own career destiny. Beyond the Bamboo Ceiling was a game changer for me. It didn't just inspire me, it gave me the concrete tools I needed to break through the barriers that had held me back for so long. And if you're struggling like I did, trying to navigate a corporate world that wasn't built for you, I can't recommend this book enough. It's not just a guide, it's a lifeline. If you're serious about breaking through your own bamboo ceiling, grab a copy of this book today. It transformed my life, and it can do the same for you.